My favourite thing about Fleetwood is that it's one way in and one way out.
It has a tram system running down the main high street.
It's a dead end.
If it wasn't for us, there would be no Blackpool.
We have got 3 lighthouses.
Fish Sid Little.
It's a little bit odd.
Fisherman's Friend.
Well, I use Fisherman's Friend so I can sing.
The worst thing about Fleetwood is...
Oh dear, perhaps the smell sometimes.
Yeah, the fishy smell. And the seagulls. They frighten me to death, seagulls.
Why would you want to live anywhere else?
Mark Steele's in town.
Thank you very much and welcome to Mark Steele's in Town, which this week comes from Fleetwood, the Lancashire coastal town renowned for its stately homes and noble arts and its contribution to opera. And for its famous trams that head along the promenade and go all the way to the outlying village of Blackpool. And there's so much to see and do in Fleetwood. For example, the local tourist website says Fleetwood does have a sandhill known as the Mount, from where there are spectacular views. And that is a typical positive Fleetwood attitude. There you go, Blackpool, you don't need a tower, a lump of sand's just as good. And you're not just next to the sea here, you're behind a river. So you're at the end of the road with a river in front of you. You can't go through Fleetwood, you've just got to turn round and go back. And yet your town motto on a huge floral display on the Mount is onwards. But you can't go onwards. A more accurate motto would be, you're stuck here now. And you can tell the rest of Lancashire is terrified of Fleetwood because there's only this one road into town and Lancashire loves to cut it off with the most comprehensive set of roadworks known to man. So by far the easiest way to get here is a plane to the Isle of Man and swim. There's a document I saw from the council called Zoning of the Seafront, and it says... It's very easy to arrive by car or tram in Fleetwood and have no knowledge of the presence of the sea. I know what they mean, because you keep it hidden, don't you? There must be quite a few people who live here who've no idea there's a sea. One day they look west for a change, you go, where's all that come from? And you've got trams, and they're not just like recent, like Sheffield and Manchester. You've kept yours all along. You probably had no idea that by 1962 everyone else had got rid of theirs. We are very proud of your trams here in Fleetwood, and rightly so, even though they are technically Blackpools, but rightly so. But they don't have what you have, Tram Sunday. That must be so exciting that for your special day, you have a look at something that you only normally get to see on every other day of the year. Tram Sunday looks like it was particularly thrilling in 2010 because that year, according to the Gazette, Tram Sunday has had to be cancelled due to roadworks. Yeah, but you could... It's what? There's no trams on Tram Sunday. Yeah, all I can say is that having been here a few days, this doesn't surprise me. I went on a tram. Luckily, it was on No Tram Wednesday, so luckily the place was full of them. And the first thing I realised is it is a disgrace that they're known as Blackpool's trams because the Fleetwood end of the line is so much more of an attraction. Kids going through Blackpool on the tram must go, oh, this pleasure beach and illuminations rubbish. When are we going to get to the fun bit? Lindell Road overlooking the delivery bay at Fisherman's Friend. And when I bought my ticket, I said, I'm not sure where I'm going, I just fancy the ride, really. And the conductor, honestly, he said, well, get off at Cleveley's then, there's plenty to see there. Now, the ferry link across the River Wyre is obviously a crucial lifeline for people the other side in Knott End. So it's handy that it only shuts down for 3 months in the winter. to get fixed. And now other ferry companies might find another boat, but you can credit the Knot-End Ferry Company with being much more careful than that, because you can't get any old ship to navigate the treacherous waters from Fleetwood to Knot-End. It's 20 or 30 yards across that river. Many a galleon has perished on that unspeakable journey. It is amazingly thin, isn't it? Like a triple jumper could do it, probably. I tried a few times, but it was always being fixed or something serviced, until at last it was working with a sign saying ferry today, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. But I got there and they said, it's not running, we've run out of water. Because the tide had gone out. So there was just mud. And I said to the man running the ferry, that's disappointing. And honestly, he said, well, what did you want to go for anyway? There's nothing there. Thus it was, I was deprived of one of the great voyages of the world. I'm not especially nautical, but it occurred to me there might be one way of making the crossing more efficient, which is to get a ferry that's a few yards longer, and then you could just walk through it to the other side. Lots of people have told me that there are just a few old retired people in Knot-End. And is that not true? Is it? Yeah. Well, I think it might nearly be true, but when I looked on the virtual Lancaster news website, I saw this story. Police have carried out a raid on a £15,000 cannabis factory in a bungalow in Knot-End. We have to get the ferry to Fleetwood if we want bread or food. But what we can get this side of the river is top-quality Afghan skunk. There's a glorious statue of Eros. A replica of the one in Piccadilly Circus from London, on the roundabout as you're coming into town. A fine example of the Fleetwood spirit, I think. The Lofthouse family that owns Fisherman's Friend bought it in the 1990s, and it was put there because when you ask most people which place they most associate with the god of love and beauty, of unbridled passion, they say the roadworks on the A585. Now, the message on the plinth conveys the meaning and the power of love. It says, Fisherman's Friend welcomes you to Fleetwood. There's a Brazilian influence as well, of course, because if you climb up the statue of Christ the Redeemer in Rio, the sign there says, Strepsils welcomes you to Rio de Janeiro. And then councillors argued with the Lofthouse family about who should pay for cleaning it, and then it had to be taken away altogether because, according to the local Gazette, experts said that the sea air and salty water had caused irreparable damage, which baffled the experts as they couldn't work out where the sea air and salty water was coming from. And this is the optimism that created Fleetwood in the first place, because Fleetwood was the first planned town of the Victorian era. Up until Victorian times, there was nothing here. It was just sand dunes and rabbits. There was a report that I read of a visit to Blackpool in 1813. From this book, Fleetwood, A Town is Born. A single house in Blackpool receives 120 people to sleep in a night. 5 or 6 beds are crammed into each room and 5 or 6 people crammed into each bed. Visitors take turns so that all may get some rest. Now, sadly, Blackpool's gone downhill a bit since then, but the point is, this coast was completely desolate. The land here was owned by Peter Hesketh, who was in his 20s, and Peter Hesketh wrote that he'd seen the workers in the new factories of Manchester and decided to create a healthier version of Manchester. So you can't fault him there for ambition. In effect, he was thinking, one day this Spartan land I see before me will be full of lads going, Fleetwood's where it's all happening, mate, and it know what I mean, like, you know, like you got to get down the Granada Fish Bar, mate, it goes on to 6 in the morning, banging, mate, and it, you know. So Hesketh hired an architect called Decimus Burton and then changed his own name to Peter Hesketh Fleetwood after his grandmother's family name. Now, there was a logic to Hesketh's plan, which was this. The first passenger railways had opened, so there was a railway line going from Euston to Preston. But George Stephenson and the railway engineers insisted there's no way that a railway line could be built through the Lake District. But you would be able to get to Scotland if there was a line from Preston to here, and then you got a boat. It just seemed logical to build a town here for all the travellers that there would be. The new town would be called Fleetwood, and it was going to be a gold mine, he was sure of it. Streets were built and a gasworks and a hotel called the North Euston. According to Fleetwood, a pictorial history, a book that I read there, that such a place as Fleetwood should have sprung up in such an incredibly short time reminds one of the fables of the East. That's a fair account, isn't it? Because the records show that the way Hesketh Fleetwood built the town was he found a magic lamp, and when he rubbed it, a genie appeared, granting him 3 wishes. So he said, I'll have a hotel, a gasworks, and a never-ending supply of barely edible throat lozenges. It must have been amazing. Maybe more like the Wild West, I would think, than a fable from the East, with all these new people coming out to a barren piece of land and building railways and hotels. And Queen Victoria visited the hotel. It must have seemed magnificent, that building. Hesketh Fleetwood got this Corsican, a man called Zenon Vantini, to run it. And through the connections, he got a band from the Italian Opera House to come to Fleetwood and play every day during the summer. So maybe Fleetwood could be a home of opera. I cough and I splutter, I mumble and mutter, if only a lozenge could cure my stuttering throat. There were 56 carriages on the train that brought people here from Preston on Sundays, except, of course, on Train Sunday. And then, this was the terrible thing, the engineers found a way of building a railway line through the Lake District. So no one needed to come here to get to Scotland after all. And then Fleetwood went into decline. So you've got to feel sorry for poor Hesketh Fleetwood. He must be the only person ever to lose out because the train service turned out to be better than what they said it would be. But Fleetwood did its thing that it does. It just went, right, we'll try something else, because after this, the new town was then to be the new holiday resort for the North West. And this worked for a couple of years, but went wrong because, according to the history there, the death blow to Fleetwood as a holiday resort was struck when the branch line was opened in Blackpool. So Fleetwood then aimed to be one of the country's major docks, and by the 1870s the port here was as busy as Liverpool's. But then in 1894 the Manchester Ship Canal opened, so Fleetwood went down the plug again. So maybe the floral display motto on the mount should say, we do try, we just don't have much luck. If you built a space station here, a week later a quicker one would be open linking Morecambe to Venus. But all this turmoil, it does mean that you have some brilliant local historians who've become fascinated by Fleetwood's history. So I'm going to introduce Dick now. Dick, are you there?
I am.
So, Dick, why is Fleetwood so unlucky?
I don't know, it's just been one long roller coaster. Peak, trough.
So
we're at a trough at the moment, definitely.
Well, that's all right, because it's when you get to the peak that everything seems to go wrong.
Yeah.
You wrote the Fleetwood Historic Town Trail pamphlet.
Yeah.
It's got a series of photos on of places that are historic interest. I'm especially interested in photo number 11, which is a boarded-up mechanic's workshop that used to do MOTs, but now the windows are smashed and covered in chipboard. Does that bring in a lot of visitors? What's it there for?
One of the early buildings on Dock Street, I think, in another...
Right, well... puts the pyramids in the shade, doesn't it? This Fleetwood resilience that almost comes off is even reflected in the museum that Dick helps to run, because there's some brilliant stuff in there. But when I went there, the fire alarm went off and these 3 fire engines arrived, and Jennifer, who works there, said, that's the 4th time this has happened while I've been here on my own. If there's an explosion down the coast, they'll have to say, oh, well, all the fire engines are at Fleetwood Museum as usual, so Lytham St Anne's will just have to burn to the ground. But you don't give up. In 1910, you built a record-breaking pier here in Fleetwood, and the record it broke was for the shortest pier in Britain. Inevitable, I suppose, in 2008 it burnt down. I'm sure lots of you remember this tragic event and how the fire brigade didn't get there because they thought, oh, it's that bloody woman from the museum again. But you had something that no other town could boast, even fishing towns. This was the home of Fisherman's Friend. One of the first people I met here while I was stood in the museum, and he just said, see them Fisherman's Friend? Fishermen never used to go to doctors. Whatever were wrong with them, they'd have a fisherman's friend to be right as rain. And I honestly think if I'd said, what, even Ebola, he'd have gone, well, yeah, you needed two for that. I reckon there should be an episode of Casualty set in Fleetwood. Doctor, my patient has a spinal injury, fractured fibula, suspected broken pelvis, internal bleeding, multiple lacerations of face, arms, back and shoulders. Fisherman's Friend. Maybe extra as a suppository. According to the pictorial history, who would have guessed that a simple 19th century remedy for the coughs and colds of fishermen would today rank alongside Coca-Cola and Sony? The Fisherman's Friend website has a section called Lozenges of the Stars. And it tells us, it's official, Stevie Wonder is a Fisherman's Friend fanatic. See, positive, but maintaining a sense of proportion. I went on a tour around the Fisherman's Friend factory. It's quite hard to get them to take you, and when you're going round, you realise why they're careful who they take, because the lozenges are actually made by Oompa Loompas, and they don't want anyone... And all around there's this amazing methylated aroma, which it's brilliant. Loads of it is like a chemistry lab, and then you see this paste getting turned into these billions of little fisherman friends. It does, I'd say, it does look a bit Breaking Bad in there. And so Sonia helped show us round the factory. How long have you worked there, Sonia?
I've worked there 10 years now.
And so your lungs must be huge.
Never suffer from a cold.
How does this work? It must be very hard to ring in sick and say, oh, I've got a bit of a blocked up nose.
No, broken leg maybe. We don't accept colds. When I walked you through the lozenge plant, we had mint on that day, and if we'd have took you into the mint plant, your eyes would have streamed. But we're used to it, you know, we don't...
Oh, I'm sorry I missed that, because the trouble is I went on Mint Sunday, so... Has anyone ever had so many they've actually caught fire? But even Fisherman's Friend, I don't think, has made Fleetwood as proud as one other institution here that's risen in recent times to a position of global power, Fleetwood Football Club. With its mild and passive support. One of the main features of the club and its fans is its friendly camaraderie with Blackpool. The two of you are like brothers, as far as I can see. I think one source of tension is that Blackpool's nickname is the Seasiders, and Fleetwood were originally going to have that nickname, except none of the club knew that they were by the seaside. There are marvellous moments, they tell us, such as in 1980 the club reached the first round of the FA Cup, where they met filed neighbours Blackpool. The Seasiders triumphed 4-0, but the glory belonged to Fleetwood. I went to a match. I went to the home match against Coventry, and there was 3,000 people. It was a brilliant atmosphere, loads of teenagers. There was a cheery, exuberant atmosphere of them all singing Fleetwood up and Blackpool down, doo-dah, doo-dah. And there were Fleetwood FC flags hanging over the back terrace. One said, Fleetwood FC fan club of Papua New Guinea. An organisation that has more members than I would have guessed, to be honest. Something else that impressed was that half the ground looks really beautifully modern, hospitality boxes, a classy design, and then there's a bit of the ground that backs onto people's houses where I expect someone comes out every now and then and goes, I'm keeping this ball. You should be over the fields playing, not right here where you're a nuisance. But even Fleetwood Town's sporting achievements were surpassed by one other sporting phenomena of Fleetwood, Jane Couch, who in 1998 became the first British woman to be granted a professional boxing licence, and she was otherwise known as the Fleetwood Assassin. Now, from reading her autobiography I've got there, I'd say it was never that likely that she was going to pursue an academic career. This is the opening words of the autobiography. This book would never have been written if it wasn't for my coach. He often said to me, Jane, you're hilarious, because he's a bit posh and uses big words like that. Now, see, I don't like it when people use big words to show off, but I've never thought, ooh, hark at you with your hilarious. Trying to get into Eton, are we, your majesty? Now, Jane was born in Albert Street, and this is the sort of thing that she says about her childhood round there. Albert Street runs off the Roundtree Clock Tower, and opposite the top looms the Church of St. Peter's. Every Christmas, they had a nativity scene outside with a crib, and I wanted that baby Jesus. I wanted him so much that every year I would take a screwdriver to try and force open the glass case. But it was too well made. A saw didn't work either. But best of all, she then says, I'm still obsessed with it. I'd steal it now if I could. And then she got in fights, especially when she was living on Bold Street with her boyfriend, because she says, he was a pacifist, so I had to fight to stop people picking on him. Because in Fleetwood, if you go, shut your mouth or my girlfriend will smack your head in. That counts as pacifism. And then Jane saw a documentary about women's boxing, and she started training and she entered into proper fights, winning every fight that she fought. But the British Boxing Board of Control refused to grant her a professional licence because she was a woman. And this was their argument. Premenstrual tension makes women too unstable to box. And she was very thoughtful about what her battle meant. And eventually she won her campaign and she got her licence. In her autobiography, she wrote, one of the things people kept saying to me when I got my licence was, it's really brilliant what you have done for other women, but these women's rights types and feminists got on my tits. I wasn't trying to be Joan of Arc or Emmeline Pankhurst or whatever her name was. It's like a debate on Mumsnet, isn't it? Now, Fleetwood often seems to be at the centre of women's issues. Are you aware that according to the health section of the Fleetwood website, Fleetwood is set to become the first town in the UK to proclaim itself as a breastfeeding welcome town? And there's a sign as you're driving into the town, or as you're stuck by the roadworks coming into the town, there's a sign that says, welcome to Fleetwood, where breastfeeding is always welcome. You're doing it again. I'm surprised the sign doesn't say, welcome to Fleetwood, breastfeeding capital of Europe. For breast milk of the stars, Diana Ross is a Fleetwood breast milk fanatic. There are lots of stars connected to the town. John Lennon used to come here on his holidays as a kid and famously wrote in his diary about Fleetwood, imagine there's no sea. It's easy if you try. Alfie Boe, the tenor, comes from here. And he always seems to mention this in his interviews. There's one recent one that starts, Fleetwood was different from nearby Blackpool. It's much more homely. And he referred to this in the song that he sang for the Queen at the Royal Albert Hall that went, so proud of Fleetwood that I come from it. It's not like Blackpool, just full of vomit. It's a controversial place here. Partly this is because it's all about fishing, but there's no fishing anymore. But luckily now the town is being introduced to a much more stable industry, fracking. Now, instead of going out hundreds of miles to sea to endure danger, you can be in peril right here without moving. I don't know, are people opposed to it here? I can understand that lots of people feel it will attract investment and bring employment and stability to the area and all these arguments, but my main concern is that what will probably happen, they'll just complete the drilling and then discover a gold mine at Lytham St Anne's and abandon Fleetwood. But that would be the nature of Fleetwood. I reckon it's a testimony to keeping trying, this town. The fact that it keeps going, it's stuck on its own at the end of a road with Blackpool's tower haunting it in the horizon. But you're like the town set up in the Wild West. It feels like everybody here owns the place. And I love the fact that the seaside here is a proper seaside. And Rossall, the stately home, is still there, used as a school. And the first professional woman boxer was from here. And the hotel manager did bring singers from Italy. And now you have got Alfie Boe. So Fleetwood is renowned for its stately homes, its noble arts and its contribution to opera. It was such a pride of Victorian Britain that Queen Victoria actually recorded her thoughts of her journey here in her diary. And I will leave you, good people of Fleetwood, with the thoughts of Queen Victoria. Upon arriving in this splendid new nautical town, one is drawn towards the majesty of my empire's navy and the immense task of maintaining the ships of our fleet, none more so than the Knot End Ferry... that must take at least 1,000 of our finest men to keep it afloat. Albert was due to meet me having travelled by road, but was sadly curtailed in this endeavour by the roadworks on the A585, though the signs assured him they would be finished by April 1852. Upon the Prime Minister's advice, I greeted the town with the words, "I'm delighted to be here, rather than in Blackpool," which I regard as nothing more than an outlying village. But then again, as Queen, I'm posh and use big words like that. Thanks very much, Fleetwood.
Mark Steele's In Town was written and presented by Mark Steele, with additional material by Pete Sinclair, and it was produced in Fleetwood by Carl Cooper.